They laughed at the new janitor every chance they got. They mocked her old gray uniform, whispered behind her back, and treated her like she didn't belong. To them, she was just another poor young woman trying to survive. But none of them knew. The woman mopping their floors was about to inherit everything they had spent years trying to steal. Welcome back to Good News Story. If you enjoy emotional stories filled with family secrets, betrayal, justice, and unforgettable endings, you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. Now, let's begin. The CEO of Harrison Global Holdings was Margaret Harrison, a 56-year-old businesswoman known across America for building one of the country's most successful real estate companies. Strong, intelligent, and respected, Margaret had spent over 30 years building an empire from the ground up. Many people believed Margaret had no children. That rumor spread because her only daughter had spent the last 8 years studying business and finance in Switzerland, far away from the public eye. Only a handful of people knew the truth. Her daughter, Naomi Harrison, had quietly returned home. Instead of announcing her return, Naomi and her mother came up with a surprising plan. "I don't want you to walk into this company as the CEO's daughter," Margaret told her. "I want you to see people for who they truly are. Let them believe you're nobody." Naomi smiled. "I'll start from the very bottom." The next Monday morning, dressed in a simple gray janitor's uniform, with her hair tied back and a cleaning cart in front of her, Naomi walked into Harrison Global Holdings as the company's newest cleaner. No one recognized her. Not the executives. Not the managers. Not even Margaret's own brothers and sisters, who had spent years believing they would one day inherit control of the company because they thought Margaret had no child. Behind Margaret's back, her siblings had already begun fighting over who would become the next CEO after her retirement. They had no idea that the real heir was already inside the building, holding a mop and watching everything. Naomi's first week was harder than she had imagined. Every morning, she arrived before sunrise, quietly pushing her cleaning cart through the marble hallways while the city was still waking up. She scrubbed floors, emptied trash bins, cleaned glass doors, and polished conference rooms that executives would use only a few hours later. No one greeted her. No one thanked her. To everyone in the building, she was invisible. The only person who treated her kindly was an elderly security guard named Mr. Lewis. "Good morning, young lady," he would say every day with a warm smile. "Good morning, sir," Naomi always replied. One morning, Mr. Lewis noticed she hadn't eaten breakfast. Without saying a word, he handed her a cup of coffee and a sandwich. "You remind me of my daughter," he said. Naomi smiled gratefully. "Thank you. I'll never forget your kindness." Meanwhile, on the top floor, Margaret Harrison sat quietly in her office, watching the company's security cameras. She wasn't spying on her daughter because she didn't trust her. She was watching the people she had trusted for years. Every insult. Every act of kindness. Every lie. Everything was being recorded. Margaret turned to her longtime assistant. "How many complaints has Naomi received?" The assistant looked at her tablet. "None, ma'am." "And how many complaints has she made against other employees?" "Not a single one." Margaret nodded proudly. "She's exactly the leader I raised." Across the hallway, Margaret's younger brother, Victor Harrison, walked into the executive boardroom. Victor had spent years believing he would inherit Harrison Global Holdings. He often bragged to other executives. "My sister has no children. When she retires, someone has to take over." The other board members secretly agreed. None of them had ever heard Margaret mention a daughter. That afternoon, Victor noticed Naomi cleaning outside the boardroom. He frowned. "Hey, you." Naomi looked up politely. "Yes, sir? This floor should have been cleaned an hour ago." "I'm sorry, sir. I'll clean it immediately." Victor kicked her mop bucket with his expensive shoe, spilling dirty water across the polished floor. Several executives laughed. "Looks like you'll have to clean it twice," one of them joked. Naomi quietly picked up the bucket. She didn't argue. She didn't complain. She simply started cleaning again. Upstairs, Margaret watched everything on the security monitor. Her face remained calm. But inside, she was deeply disappointed. She had just learned something about her own brother that no business report could ever reveal. And she silently wrote one more name on the list of people who would never be trusted with her company. The next morning, Naomi arrived at work 30 minutes early. She tied her hair into a neat ponytail, put on her gray janitor's uniform, and began cleaning the executive floor before anyone arrived. As she wiped down the reception desk, she overheard voices coming from the conference room. The door wasn't completely closed. Victor Harrison was inside with Margaret's younger sister, Diane Harrison, and 2 senior executives. Victor lowered his voice. "Margaret is getting older. She can't run this company forever." Diane smirked. And since she never had children, one of us will take over. Everyone around the table nodded. Naomi froze. They really believed her mother had no daughter. Victor continued. The board meeting next month is our chance. We just need enough votes. One executive asked nervously. What if Margaret chooses someone outside the family? Victor laughed. She won't. Besides, I already have people on the board supporting me. Naomi quietly finished cleaning and walked away before anyone noticed she had heard everything. Later that afternoon, Margaret called Naomi to her private office using the service elevator so no one would become suspicious. The moment Naomi stepped inside, Margaret hugged her. How are you holding up? Naomi smiled. I'm learning more than I ever could in business school. Margaret looked into her daughter's eyes. What happened today? Naomi told her everything she had overheard. Victor's plan. Diane's confidence. The board members already choosing sides. Margaret sighed deeply. So they've finally shown their true intentions. Naomi frowned. Mom, why don't you just tell everyone who I am? Margaret gently shook her head. Not yet. They're wearing masks. If I reveal you now, they'll simply pretend to respect you. I need to know who they really are. Naomi nodded. I understand. Margaret smiled proudly. This company isn't just buildings and money. It's people. A leader must know the hearts of the people she leads. The following day, Naomi was assigned to clean the executive dining room. It was lunchtime. Executives filled the room, laughing over expensive meals. Naomi quietly wiped the tables after people finished eating. As she reached for a glass, Diane looked at her with disgust. Cleaner. Naomi stopped. Yes, ma'am? You're too slow. Before Naomi could answer, Diane deliberately knocked over a full glass of orange juice. The drink splashed across the white marble floor. Several executives turned to watch. Diane folded her arms. Well. Clean it up. Naomi knelt without saying a word. As she wiped the floor, she heard laughter behind her. One woman whispered. I can't imagine living like that. Another replied. Neither can I. She's probably grateful just to have this job. Naomi's hands trembled for a moment. But she remembered her mother's words. Don't let pride make you lose your purpose. She took a deep breath and continued cleaning. Across the room, a young accountant named Ethan Brooks quietly stood up. He walked over, grabbed a stack of paper towels, and knelt beside Naomi. Let me help. The room fell silent. Diane stared at him. Ethan, what are you doing? He looked up calmly. I'm helping someone. Diane scoffed. She's just the janitor. Ethan met her eyes without fear. No. She's a human being. For the first time since Naomi had started working at Harrison Global Holdings. Someone had chosen kindness over status. Naomi looked at Ethan with grateful eyes, knowing she would never forget that moment. From that day on, Naomi paid close attention to Ethan Brooks. He wasn't the richest employee. He wasn't one of the senior executives. He was simply a hardworking accountant who believed everyone deserved respect. Whenever he passed Naomi in the hallway, he smiled. Good morning. Those two words meant more to Naomi than he could ever imagine. A week later, Harrison Global Holdings began preparing for its annual charity gala. The event would bring together investors, board members, business partners, and the media. Every department was busy decorating the building. As usual, Naomi and the cleaning staff were expected to work late into the night. While cleaning the executive conference room, Naomi noticed several documents left on the table. She had no intention of reading them. She simply gathered them neatly so they wouldn't be misplaced. Just then, Victor Harrison stormed into the room. What do you think you're doing? Naomi stepped back immediately. I was just organizing these papers, sir. Victor snatched the file from her hands. These are confidential. I wasn't reading them. I don't care. Victor shouted. People like you shouldn't even be touching executive documents. His voice echoed through the hallway. Employees stopped what they were doing and turned to watch. Naomi lowered her head. I'm sorry. Victor pointed toward the door. Get out before I report you to Human Resources. Without saying another word, Naomi quietly walked away. Several employees whispered among themselves. She probably wanted to steal company information. I knew something was suspicious about her. Only Ethan didn't believe it. He had seen the entire incident from the other end of the hallway. He knew Naomi had done nothing wrong. That evening, Margaret received a report from Human Resources. Victor had officially requested that Naomi be fired. Margaret calmly placed the report on her desk. Her assistant looked worried. Should I reject the request? Margaret smiled faintly. No. The assistant looked confused. No? Not yet. I want to see who stands for justice when there's nothing to gain. The next morning, Naomi was called into human resources. She took a deep breath before entering. Victor, Diane, the HR manager, and several supervisors were already seated. Victor crossed his arms confidently. This employee violated company policy. The HR manager looked at Naomi. Is there anyone who can speak on your behalf? Before Naomi could answer, the conference room door opened. It was Ethan. I can. Every head turned toward him. Victor frowned. You weren't invited. Ethan remained calm. I witnessed everything. He looked directly at the HR manager. Naomi never opened those documents. She was protecting them from being damaged. Victor slammed his hand on the table. Are you calling me a liar? I'm saying the truth matters more than job titles. The room became silent. The HR manager glanced at the security department. Can we review the hallway footage? Victor's confident smile disappeared. For the first time, he looked nervous. Naomi watched quietly, realizing that the truth was beginning to expose itself. But she also knew the biggest revelation was still waiting. The human resources manager looked toward the security officer. Please play the footage from yesterday afternoon. The large screen at the front of the room came to life. Everyone watched in silence. The video showed Naomi entering the conference room with her cleaning cart. She carefully wiped the table. Then she noticed the confidential documents lying dangerously close to a cup of coffee. She gently moved the file away from the edge of the table. She never opened it. She never looked inside. A few seconds later, Victor burst into the room. Exactly as Ethan had described. The room fell silent. The HR manager slowly turned toward Victor. So, she never violated company policy. Victor forced a smile. Well, perhaps I misunderstood the situation. Ethan shook his head. No, sir. You accused an innocent employee without checking the facts. Several supervisors exchanged uncomfortable glances. The HR manager closed the report. Naomi Brooks. Naomi politely corrected him. It's Naomi Bennett. My apologies, Miss Bennett. The complaint against you is dismissed. Naomi nodded respectfully. Thank you. She stood up and quietly left the room. She didn't celebrate. She didn't humiliate Victor. She simply returned to work. From the top floor, Margaret Harrison had watched the entire hearing through the company's internal live conference system. She smiled proudly. My daughter passed another test. Her assistant looked puzzled. Another test? Margaret nodded. She had every reason to reveal who she was today. But she chose humility instead. The assistant smiled. She really is ready. Margaret looked out the window. Not yet. There's still one more lesson. A few days later, the company announced a major celebration. Harrison Global Holdings would be marking its 30th anniversary. Employees from every branch across the country would attend. Investors. Board members. Business journalists. Even Margaret's relatives. Everyone would be there. The announcement created excitement throughout the company. But Victor saw it as an opportunity. That evening, he invited Diane and 2 board members to dinner. This anniversary is the perfect time, Victor said. Margaret will announce her retirement soon. Diane smiled confidently. And when she does, you'll become CEO. Victor raised his glass. To the future chairman of Harrison Global Holdings. They all laughed. None of them realized. Margaret had already made her decision months ago. And the person she had chosen was still pushing a cleaning cart through the hallways. The following morning, Naomi was cleaning the executive lobby when she noticed an elderly woman struggling to carry several heavy boxes. Without hesitation, Naomi hurried over. Let me help you. The woman smiled warmly. Thank you, dear. Naomi carried the boxes all the way to the reception desk. Neither of them noticed that Victor had been watching from the balcony above. He frowned. Who invited that old woman into this building? A receptionist answered quietly. Sir, she's one of the company's oldest shareholders. Victor's face turned pale. He had nearly ordered security to throw her out. The elderly shareholder looked at Naomi and smiled. You have a kind heart. What is your name? Naomi Bennett, she replied with a gentle smile. The woman nodded thoughtfully. I hope this company never loses people like you. Naomi thanked her and returned to work. From her office upstairs, Margaret watched the moment unfold. She smiled to herself. The people who matter, she whispered, are beginning to notice her. Little did anyone know. The anniversary celebration was only 5 days away. And it would change every life inside Harrison Global Holdings forever. 5 days passed quickly. The entire headquarters buzzed with excitement as employees prepared for the company's 30th anniversary gala. Fresh flowers decorated the lobby. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Luxury cars began arriving one after another. Executives wore expensive suits and elegant gowns. The cleaning staff, however, had been instructed to stay out of sight. Naomi and the other janitors were assigned to make sure every corner of the building looked perfect before the guests arrived. As she polished the marble floor near the grand ballroom, Diane walked by with 2 executives. She glanced at Naomi and frowned. "Make sure you're nowhere near the ballroom tonight." Naomi looked up politely. "Yes, ma'am." Diane smirked. "This event is for important people. You'll only embarrass the company if the guests see you." The executives laughed as they walked away. Naomi remained silent. She simply continued polishing the floor. That afternoon, Margaret called Naomi into her private office once again. Naomi entered through the private elevator. Margaret smiled proudly. "You've done well." Naomi smiled back. "I've learned more in these few weeks than I did in years of studying." Margaret stood and walked toward the window. "Tomorrow night. Everything changes." Naomi took a deep breath. "Are you sure it's time?" Margaret nodded. "My family has already shown me who they truly are. So have my executives. And you've shown me the kind of leader you've become." She handed Naomi a small velvet box. Inside was a simple silver key. Naomi looked confused. "What is this?" Margaret smiled. "It's the key to your grandfather's office. He built this company with honesty. I've kept it locked since the day he passed away. Tomorrow, it becomes yours." Naomi's eyes filled with tears. "I won't let you down." "I know," Margaret replied softly. Meanwhile, Victor gathered Diane and several board members in a private lounge. He raised a glass of champagne. "Tomorrow night, Margaret will announce the future of Harrison Global Holdings." He grinned confidently. "And after tomorrow, I'll finally have the position I've earned." The others applauded. None of them knew that Margaret had already signed documents naming her successor. Those papers were safely locked inside her office. The following evening, the ballroom was filled with investors, reporters, and business leaders from across the country. Television cameras recorded every moment. Employees lined the walls, waiting for the CEO's speech. Naomi watched everything quietly from behind the service entrance, still wearing her janitor's uniform. Just then, Margaret's assistant approached her. "It's almost time." Naomi nodded. Her heart was racing. She had waited years for this moment. Not because she wanted power, but because she wanted to honor everything her mother had built. Outside the ballroom, Victor straightened his tie and smiled confidently. He was certain the company would soon belong to him. He had no idea that before the night was over, the woman he had insulted, ignored, and treated like she was invisible would walk onto that very stage. The grand ballroom fell silent as Margaret Harrison walked onto the stage. The applause was thunderous. For more than 30 years, she had led Harrison Global Holdings with integrity and vision. She smiled warmly at the audience before stepping to the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us as we celebrate 30 incredible years." The crowd applauded once more. Margaret spoke about the company's journey, its humble beginnings, the challenges it had overcome, and the employees who had helped build it into one of the nation's most respected businesses. Then her tone became serious. "Tonight is not only a celebration. It's also the beginning of a new chapter." The room grew quiet. Victor exchanged a confident smile with Diane. He whispered, "This is it." Margaret continued. "For the past several weeks, I've been observing this company more closely than ever before. I wanted to see something that financial reports could never show me. I wanted to see character." Several executives shifted uneasily in their seats. "I witnessed kindness. I witnessed honesty. But I also witnessed arrogance, abuse of authority, and disrespect toward employees whose only crime was having a lower job title." Victor's smile slowly faded. Margaret's eyes swept across the room. A company is not judged by how it treats its biggest investors. It is judged by how it treats the people who clean its floors, guard its doors, and work behind the scenes. The ballroom became so quiet that even the reporters stopped writing. Then Margaret said, "I would like everyone to welcome someone very special." The audience looked toward the entrance. Nothing happened. A few seconds passed. Then, to everyone's surprise, the doors opened. Naomi walked in, still wearing her gray janitor's uniform. People began whispering. "Why is the cleaner here? Did she get lost? Security should remove her." Victor looked furious. What is she doing here? Margaret smiled. Naomi. Please come and stand beside me. Naomi slowly walked toward the stage. Every step echoed through the silent ballroom. She climbed the stairs and stood next to Margaret. Still holding the same humble posture she had shown every day as a janitor. Margaret reached for Naomi's hand. Then she faced the audience. For those of you who only saw her as a janitor, I'd like to introduce you properly. A wave of anticipation swept through the room. Margaret smiled proudly. This is my daughter, Naomi Harrison. Gasps filled the ballroom. Victor's wine glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Diane covered her mouth in shock. The executives who had laughed at Naomi stared at her in disbelief. The reporters immediately lifted their cameras. Flash after flash illuminated the stage. Margaret continued. My daughter graduated with honors from one of the world's finest business schools. She returned home months ago. But instead of introducing her as my heir, we agreed she would enter this company as a janitor. I wanted her to experience this company exactly as an ordinary employee would. And I wanted to discover who among you deserved to lead alongside her. Naomi looked across the audience. She recognized every face. The people who had mocked her. The people who had ignored her. And the few who had shown her kindness. For many in that room, the night had just become the longest night of their careers. The ballroom was frozen in disbelief. No one spoke. No one moved. The only sound was the clicking of reporters' cameras as they captured Naomi standing beside Margaret. Victor couldn't believe what he was hearing. This isn't possible, he muttered. You said she had no children, Diane whispered. Margaret looked directly at her siblings. I never said that. You simply assumed. The room became even quieter. Margaret continued. My daughter has spent the last 8 years studying business, leadership, and corporate management overseas. When she returned, she asked me one question. Naomi smiled slightly. I asked my mother, how can I lead people I've never truly understood? Margaret nodded proudly. So we made a decision. She would begin at the very bottom. Not as a manager. Not as an executive. But as a janitor. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. Every insult she endured. I saw. Every act of kindness. I saw. Every abuse of authority. I saw. The giant screen behind the stage suddenly lit up. The audience turned toward it. A video began to play. The first clip showed Victor kicking Naomi's mop bucket, sending dirty water across the floor. Gasps filled the room. Another clip appeared. Diane deliberately spilling orange juice onto the floor while Naomi knelt to clean it. Then another. Executives laughing as Naomi quietly walked away after being falsely accused. One by one, the moments everyone thought would never be seen played before the entire audience. Several board members lowered their heads in embarrassment. Investors exchanged disappointed looks. The reporters wrote furiously. Victor's face turned pale. He had no excuse. Margaret faced the audience again. This company has cameras to protect its property. She looked at Victor. But recently, they protected something much more important. The truth. The ballroom erupted into applause. Not for Victor. Not for the executives. But for Naomi. The applause grew louder and louder. Many employees stood to their feet. Among them was Ethan Brooks. He smiled proudly as he applauded Naomi. Margaret noticed. She smiled. Not everyone failed this test. She invited Ethan to come to the stage. Confused, Ethan slowly walked forward. Margaret shook his hand. When everyone else saw a janitor, you saw a person. When others remained silent, you defended the truth. Ethan looked embarrassed. I only did what was right. Margaret smiled warmly. And that's exactly why this company needs people like you. The audience applauded again. Then Margaret's expression became firm. She turned toward the board of directors. Effective immediately. Victor Harrison is removed from all executive responsibilities pending a full ethics investigation. Victor's knees nearly gave way. And Diane Harrison is suspended while the board reviews her conduct toward company employees. Diane burst into tears. This can't be happening. Margaret didn't respond. She had already made her decision. Then she looked at Naomi. My daughter. Would you please say a few words to everyone? Naomi stepped toward the microphone. The room became silent once again. Everyone waited to hear what the former janitor would say. Naomi slowly stepped toward the microphone. The applause gradually faded until the ballroom became completely silent. Hundreds of eyes were fixed on her. The same people who had ignored her every morning. The same people who had laughed as she pushed her cleaning cart were now waiting to hear her speak. Naomi took a deep breath. When I first walked into this building, she began softly, no one knew my name. They only knew my uniform. The room remained silent. For weeks, I cleaned your offices, your hallways, your conference rooms, and your break rooms. I wasn't looking for special treatment. I wasn't looking for recognition. I was only looking for one thing. The truth. She paused. And I found it. Naomi looked across the ballroom. I found people who believed a person's job determines their value. I found managers who thought respect belonged only to those with expensive suits. But I also found people who reminded me why this company deserves a future. Her eyes rested on Ethan. People who chose kindness when no one was watching. Ethan smiled humbly. Naomi continued. My mother didn't ask me to become a janitor to embarrass anyone. She asked me to discover what kind of family this company had become. She looked around the room. A business is more than profits. It's more than buildings. It's more than titles. It's people. And if the people are broken, the company is already failing. Several employees wiped tears from their eyes. Even some executives looked ashamed. Naomi smiled gently. So today, I'm not here to get revenge. The audience looked surprised. I'm here to give everyone a choice. If you treated others unfairly, change. If you looked down on people, learn. If you stayed silent while others were bullied, find the courage to speak. Because tomorrow, this company starts over. The ballroom erupted into applause. Many employees stood to their feet. Some of the janitors in the back of the room were crying. For the first time in years, they felt seen. Margaret walked back to the microphone. Thank you, Naomi. She then turned toward the board of directors. Before this evening ends, I have one final announcement. An attorney carrying a leather briefcase walked onto the stage. He handed Margaret a sealed folder. Margaret opened it carefully. 6 months ago, I signed a legal succession plan. She held up the document for everyone to see. As of tonight, I will remain CEO during a short transition period. But effective January 1st, Naomi Harrison will become the next chief executive officer of Harrison Global Holdings. Thunderous applause filled the ballroom. Reporters rushed to the front, cameras flashing nonstop. Victor lowered his head. Everything he had spent years plotting for was gone. Not because it had been stolen from him, but because he had never earned it. Naomi walked over to her mother and embraced her tightly. Margaret whispered, I'm proud of the woman you've become. Naomi smiled through her tears. And everything I learned from you. The audience rose for a standing ovation. It wasn't just for the new CEO. It was for the lesson they would never forget. Never judge someone's worth by the uniform they wear, because true character is revealed by how you treat people who can do nothing for you. Thanks for watching. See you in my next video.